Hey guys, yes, I know, another video about the coronavirus. You all probably get enough of that on the news, but there's just so much misinformation online regarding this virus that it sometimes makes me mad just reading them. Good thing I have this YouTube channel, which is basically my ranting channel if you think about it. Anyway, before we get into the meat of the video today, I do want to say something about the recent claims that Nicki Minaj has been making on social media. For those of you who don't know, she went on Twitter claiming this. My cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and became impotent. His testicles became swollen. His friend was weeks away from getting married and now the girl called off the wedding, so just pray on it and make sure you're comfortable with your decision, not bullied. Okay, Nicki. First of all, who in the world goes on the internet to tell such an embarrassing story about someone? Like, geez, I'm sure he is incredibly embarrassed now that hundreds of thousands, even millions of people know about his enlarged eggs. Second of all, if something like swollen testicles was enough for his fiancée to call off the wedding, not reschedule the wedding, then that marriage was probably not going to be successful anyway. So maybe he dodged a bullet. Unless you're trying to use that to make a point on how swollen they were, which is likely what you were going for, then god damn, they must have been the size of soccer balls, and the girl was like, there's no saving him. Third of all, swollen reproductive organs is definitely not a known side effect of the vaccine. Here's the thing that's dangerous about using anecdotes to make claims like this. You really only see one instance. You see one instance where after your cousin's friend got vaccinated, he got his children swollen. But you don't know if the vaccine caused this at all. It could easily have been a coincidence that it happened right after he got vaccinated, but that would just be the timing. Easily something else could have caused this, and that's why we collect data and run tightly controlled clinical studies on tens of thousands of candidates. Because guess what? If it really is a side effect of the vaccine, we'd see more cases of it, but currently we don't see that. However, anecdotes, although entirely useless in the field of science, can be more convincing to some in the common public because it can be more relatable. Giving an instance of it happening to a friend or a friend's cousin or a cousin's friend feels more personal, and that's why anecdotes are so dangerous. That being said, Nicki Minaj having over 22 million followers spewing this kind of nonsense on the internet is completely irresponsible. I get it, she's a rapper, she's not going to know a single thing about science, but when you have so many followers, you have a responsibility to make sure you're not giving out false information. I said this in my last video and I'll say it again. We're all human, we make mistakes. But when you do make such a mistake and people call you out on it, at the very least you should send out a follow-up statement correcting yourself. That didn't happen here. Instead, she sent out tweets to double down on her position, even telling people to eat shit, I guess. I don't even know what to say about that. Anyway, since the tweet, she's been getting a lot of backlash and multiple scientists, including Dr. Fauci himself, came out to debunk her claim. So I don't think I need to say much more about this topic. It's crazy to me how someone could be so famous and have such a large following on social media that just one tweet could instantly make headlines. Anyway, moving on to the main story today. I was looking through some of Joe Rogan's other content and it turns out he released another video where he brought on a guest from the Dark Horse podcast. Wow, this is a collaboration of the century, folks. I made a video or two in the past on this guy and now I can debunk him and Joe Rogan at the same time. Amazing efficiency.
Garrett Vandenbush said this is going to become a pandemic of variants, and he talked about immune escape. And that has been very controversial. But
could you explain that to people?
Sure. What he argued, and let's just say...
Could you explain who he is, too?
Sure. He is a immunobiologist. His training is veterinary. He has training in the relevant area of vaccination technology. In any case, what he argued was that the fact of these vaccines being very narrowly targeted, right? These vaccines contain a single subunit of a single protein.
Okay, so I was originally going to let him finish his point, but he makes a lot of claims in a single breath, so we're going to break it down one by one before he makes his final conclusion for all the premises he gives. So first of all, I don't know why you single out a single person from the whole field of healthcare, where 99% of doctors and physicians would tell you actual correct information, but you chose that 1% that tells you something dubious. Second of all, this guy is a veterinarian in training. That doesn't mean knowledge doesn't overlap between the two, but compare that to someone who studies infectious diseases in humans, there's just no comparison. But I don't want to poison the well this early on in the video, so let's ignore that for now. Third of all, let's talk about what you mean by narrowly targeted.
The fact of these vaccines being very narrowly targeted, right? These vaccines contain a single subunit of a single protein.
That's basically a lie. Okay, so let's just talk a bit about the spike protein biochemistry. As you know, scientists have done a lot of studying on the conformation and makeup of spike proteins, and how to actually best target them. The spike protein is the primary target, so if you're not targeting the S protein, then you're basically trolling. Anyway, the S protein has two subunits, S1, which has the receptor binding domain, responsible for binding to the ACE2 receptors, and S2, which plays an essential role of membrane fusion and connection of the virus to the host cell. So when this guy here says only a subunit of a single protein, he must mean that the vaccine only targets either the S1 or S2 unit, most likely S1 since that's where the RBD is. Let's take a look at this claim a little more seriously and see what published scientific papers actually say. It's not like this information is unknown because scientists literally created them when designing the vaccines. And of course, each vaccine is going to be different in what they target, so let's take a look at each of them individually. I'll try to go over this quickly without giving too much technical information, but as you can see, we have different categories of vaccines. The vaccines AstraZeneca, Sputnik, Sinopharm, and CoronaVac target a full-length spike protein with the original D614 wild-type peptide. A mutation labeled 2P on the model represents K986P and V987P mutations, which is what Pfizer and Moderna covers, but the vaccine still covers the full length. Johnson & Johnson covers the two mutations just mentioned in addition to mutated furin cleavage sites R682S and R685G. The point of this is to say that although different vaccines differ in specific amino acids of the spike protein, they ultimately all cover the full length of the spike. As science goes on and we're improving our vaccine target, we're still likely going to be covering the full length of the spike protein, because honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense not to. So in conclusion, you're either wrong or lying. Moving on.
And they're being deployed in a way that is unusual. They're being deployed into an active pandemic.
But it's not like COVID is the only disease in which a vaccine was deployed in the middle of a pandemic. Measles and smallpox were pretty much the same. The viruses were still spreading like mad when they were introduced. Plus, what does that even have to do with anything? Is the vaccine supposed to be less effective against variants because it's deployed during an active pandemic?
Right? When we immunize against something like measles, the expectation is you will develop your full immunity with almost no chance of encountering measles. Right?
Not right. What is even the point of vaccines if you're not expected to be exposed to the actual infection?
In this case, what we have are vaccines that are leaky, in which they do not provide full sterilizing immunity.
I feel like there are stupid terms that always comes up randomly amongst anti-science people, because we most definitely do not use the term leaky in the scientific field. I looked up this term and apparently it means that vaccinated people can still spread the infection even if they don't develop symptoms, which really misses the point of vaccines. Sure, many vaccines also come with the benefit of stopping the spread of a particular disease, but most are for the purpose of either reducing hospitalizations or preventing symptoms. And every vaccine is different. The COVID vaccine we currently have shows that people with breakthrough infections could spread the disease, but that's pretty much the same for every vaccine. Usually if you don't develop symptoms, you won't spread it. And so far, I don't think there has been any well-documented research that shows this isn't the case for COVID vaccines. All the studies I've read at least are regarding breakthrough infections, which definitely does not meet the qualification of calling a vaccine leaky.
They are narrow.
Yeah, whatever that means.
And we are effectively creating an intense evolutionary pressure to cause the spike protein, of which this one subunit is what is contained, what the information for it is contained in the vaccines. We are putting intense evolutionary pressure on it to change so that the antibodies and other immune cell recognition mechanisms that are trained by the vaccines are incapable of finding the pathogen when it gets in. This is what causes a breakthrough case, is that the immunity that's been created is evaded by the pathogen, and if the pathogen changes, that is more likely.
A lot to unpack here. First of all, that's not what causes breakthrough cases. There can be many reasons why breakthrough infections occur, from people who are immunocompromised to the virus having mutated elsewhere and infecting vaccinated people, both of which are not the same as what you just described. Now, to get to your claim about vaccines creating intense evolutionary pressure on the spike protein to change, no, that is not the case. This is a claim that I saw floating around on the internet for a while, but is not backed up by any scientific logic, reasoning, or data. To know why, we'll have to delve a little bit into the biology, so bear with me. Viruses mutate all the time, more so than eukaryotic or prokaryotic cells, because they lack proofreading enzymes, so when DNA or RNA mutates, it goes without being checked. Although mutations can happen at pretty much any time, it happens the most often in viruses while it has infected a cell, because that is when its DNA is replicating to produce new viruses. And as you remember from your 8th grade biology classes, replication is very prone to errors due to how faulty polymerases can be. So in other words, more infections equals more mutations. That's why I advocate so much for countries, especially ones that are better off and have more money, to help control viral spread in other countries. It may not seem like it's your business, but when the virus goes uncontrolled in other parts of the world, it will have more mutations and eventually a new variant will appear, which will ultimately make it back to your own country. That is what creates variants, when more people are infected. Now let's talk about why vaccines do not cause variants to occur.
And so what he said was, if you vaccinate into an active pandemic with vaccines like this, what you will get is a evolutionary pressure for a radiation of variants, an evolutionary radiation of different molecular signatures, changes in the spike protein, that will then cause the vaccines to be less and less effective at producing immunity, which is exactly what we see.
Yeah, so that's entirely false. This is what happens when you try to apply your own random thinking process into something that science already understands. Now, let's be clear. Most mutations will cripple the virus. However, ones that do end up helping the virus and giving it an advantage will cause that new virus to survive better and spread better throughout the population. The Delta variant, for example, spreads faster and infects cells to a better affinity. Now, when a new virus infects a new person, it's not going to enter with a great deal of genetic variety. Unlike other types of organisms like bacteria, viruses cannot replicate without a host, meaning it gets its variety while infecting patients and not outside. Think of it this way. The virus needs to first obtain its genetic variety, and that can only happen when it gets a chance to mass replicate. If a vaccine blocks it from infecting a person to begin with, it won't have a chance to even obtain its genetic variety, which is the very first step to producing a viral variant. Evolutionary pressure will eliminate a population if it does not have variety, so it will not cause new variants to occur.
So he predicted this
Absolutely. He did predict it.
accurately.
Accurately predicted it. Now, is every component of his model correct? That's a much harder question to answer. But what I would say is any time somebody succeeds in predicting better than the so-called experts, you want to know how they did it.
What model are you even talking about? This claim is entirely bogus. He did not, quote, predict better than the so-called experts. Variants are going to pop up. We all know that is going to happen. That is something that even when the pandemic just started, scientists warned about. It's something that even when there isn't a pandemic, we knew about. And in addition, he didn't even get the reason right. Variants of concern do not come about through vaccinations. It comes about through infections. Like, I don't understand. In what way did whomever this is predict better than experts? I'm not going to be praised for, quote, knowing more than experts if I tell everyone that the sky is blue, then proceed to say it's because an invisible elephant painted the sky. Like, what exactly do you even mean here?
And he was making absolute evolutionary sense, right? His concerns were very well honed, and he was making sense, and then the world that he predicted emerged. And it is now incumbent on us to say, okay, have we learned anything from this, right? Do the vaccines need to be modified such that they don't produce this effect? There are conceivable ways you could do that.
Oh, really? Is there? You're saying there's a way to redesign the vaccines to solve a problem that doesn't exist? Please enlighten me.
Right? But if we don't do it, if we just say, well, more of the same, have a booster of the same thing, it's not going to solve the problem. So
boosters is a topic that deserves its own video. Boy, do I have a lot to say about that. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I would like to thank my loyal patrons, Fireshard, Alan Morton, and Miss Fixit for their generous support. I will see you all next week, hopefully on a video not COVID related.